Hello, welcome to another episode of Muse.
Make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, fam.
Kia ora everyone and welcome back to Muse. Oh man, tonight I'm actually really excited because we have TeMatera from AAA Records and Red Room Studios. I mean, it's not often that I've ever spoken with anybody that owns a record label, and for someone to share their knowledge with you, I think is going to be fantastic. Lots of things that we've spoken about in advance that we've planned, so much to talk about. Matt, I actually want to just ask you quickly to share a little bit about like how you even got involved in music, and talk to us about that sort of stuff. I'm very interested to hear more about that.
I guess it started with my brother's record collection. My brother was a fair bit older than me, and when he left home, he left me the records he didn't want and a shitty old record player. But nonetheless, I loved them. I absolutely loved them. They spoke to me. And as young as I can remember, I always wanted to be a drummer. And so naturally I became a guitarist. It was like gravity. I didn't have a choice really. It was always going to be what I ended up doing.
What sort of records were it that you were listening to that your brother left you?
Oh, absolute shite. There was things like Shawaddy Waddy and but there was some gems in there. I think my parents had like some Carpenter's records, and
nice.
Like my dad, bless him, didn't have the best musical taste. I think the Carpenters was probably the best thing that they had.
Yeah.
But he had like records by Akabilk, and you won't even know who that is, but he was this dude who'd take cover versions and played them on a flute. Or a trumpet or something bizarre. But then basically, through school, just being introduced to different types of music, and basically listening to Radio 1. There was a radio station in the UK, and there was a DJ on there called John Peel, who had a massive influence on life.
Very famous name.
Yeah, well, the good thing about John, and this is something I'd recommend for anyone, is that he had a massively wide musical taste. He didn't see music as specifically genre based, as in, of course, there's genres, but he was interested in music as a human expression. So, listening to his show, you'd have like Swedish death metal followed by punk music, followed by Cuban jazz, followed by some Swahili guitar music. Followed by blues. It was just the most eclectic combination of music you can imagine, and that had a massive effect on me because it was so exciting. I can remember like listening to like these really heavy bands, and like at the time it was really challenging to listen to, but there was something that just got my blood flowing, my heart racing. And then I remember hearing some blues players and being utterly touched, and there was this emotional authenticity coming through. And I didn't realize it, but it was basically starting my education in music, and starting to understand the beauty and complexity of the art that we are so lucky to have.
That's awesome. And you know what? One of the things that I really liked about what you've said is the fact that you were listening to the albums that your brother left you. It's like we spoke before we started recording about the art of listening, and I'd be interested to talk with you about what you think the art of listening is. What are some tips and bits of advice that you would give people that because we live in a world right now where we can flick, if we don't like a song, we just change the song. And there's so much music, which at the same time is fantastic. There's so much music, but at the same time, there's so much music, right? So, before we were recording, I mentioned about how I would listen to the records with my headphones or a good pair of speakers. I learned from listening, but it's not really about what I know. It's about, how do you listen, and what are some things that you can talk to help students get better at listening?
That's a very big question, and
Yes.
I don't think the right answer to it, because it comes down to individual preference and taste.
But that's good then, because then that means that if it is a big question, you can choose to talk about whatever you like about it. Like, what are you doing when you're listening to music? Because it is very subjective.
I think listening to music is your best teacher for a start. I mean, when I was growing up, it turns out I was dyslexic. So, not that they knew that at the time. I found that subsequently, but it did mean that for me, written form of music was challenging, and didn't work for me. So, my learning style, so the way I learn, is by observing people and by listening intently and watching intently. So the way I've learned to produce music, mix music, write music has been by intently listening to music that I love, even music that challenges me. Because as a producer, sometimes I'm working on music which isn't my natural genre, but I have to understand it and I have to understand how it's constructed. So close your eyes. The part of the brain that deals with listening also deals with visual stimulation. So one of the best techniques I can tell anybody is, if you really want to listen to music, close your eyes, disengage that part of the brain and allow that part of your brain to only be focused on what it hears. And you will find that you will be absorbed into the stereo field much deeper, and your brain will be able to pick apart what it's hearing. So the other thing is, it's a big question, is because what's the objective for the listening? Is it, are we talking about listening for pleasure, or are we talking about listening for learning? And they're the same but different.
I agree.
And I'll give you an example of that. We were talking off air about Troy Kingi, who's an artist I'm privileged to work with on his last 3 records. And the reason I bring that up is that, for example, the album Holy Colony Burning Acres was to be a 70s reggae album, roots reggae album. So in order to create a record that sounded like that, I fully immersed myself in artists like the Abyssinians for 3 to 4 months, listened to nothing else but them intently, to understand the sound landscape in which their music sat. How was it mixed? What instrumentation did they use? What did the guitars sound like? What mics did they use? How big was the room? How did it feel? And by listening for learning, that allowed us then to make decisions to recreate the sonic space for Troy's record to feel like it's an authentic 70s album without it being as shit as a 70s album. You know what I mean? Because if you did listen to a 70s album, it's like capturing the essence without it sounding like, you did it in a game.
I want to jump in here quickly because you make a couple of interesting points that I want to mention. Is like, I'm not too sure whether or not students and people that listen to music that aren't really familiar with music in general, like how it's made and how it's produced, would be thinking about those things like room. Room has such a massive impact. Like, when you track drums and you're recording drums, people pay big money to go to special rooms to capture the, the sound that comes from that, right?
Yeah.
And
it's called the air. You're trying to capture the air in which things sit. And there's some very expensive emulators in software trying to recreate reverbs in spacious rooms. But if you've actually got a beautiful sounding room, then you're already there.
Well, Abbey Road Studios, for example, where the Beatles recorded pretty much all of their stuff.
Legendary room, it's a legendary room. Absolutely,
man. So that's interesting. So what you're saying to me is, to make that album, produce and work on that album with Troy Kingi, you needed to really learn about what that genre was and find the intricacies that were interwoven into it. So that when you were, producing, did you produce that album as well? You mentioned.
Yeah. And then, so just moving to the next record, just to complete that argument, The Ghost of Freddie Caesar, a 70s style funk record. Unfortunately, we couldn't find the original tape, so Troy was recreating these songs from memory. So we basically listened to nothing else but early 70s Southern American funk. Awesome. Artists like the Meters.
Yeah.
How what did that sound like? What was the guitar tone? How was it mixed? what was the drum tone, you know, how were the drum skins tuned, and you know, even down to mixing decisions of where you place things in the stereo field, was about creating a sonic space that made it feel really authentic, and dynamic and live and engaging, so that when you can sit down and listen to it, you get a sense of space, not just something really flat here, but actually has depth, which is, to me, one of the magic components of mixing a record. If you can create an environment, then you've done something special, hopefully.
No, that's right. And actually, another good point that comes up from that, I kind of, you have answered my question that I answered before, and you have to absorb yourself in those genres and the music to be able to make decisions, to know that this is the right, we're going in the right direction. Like if you're trying to make a funk album and all of a sudden you're making a hard rock album, then you know that you haven't listened to enough funk, right?
You've made some bad decisions.
Yeah.
You've gone to a producer who's basically forcing you down their path, not down the path that the record needs to be.
That's right.
And there's a big difference.
So here's a really cool thing that you mentioned that I just want to touch on as well about music, is that you know, with the introduction of digital platforms where you know, the dynamic headroom is very squished up. I'll never forget showing my kids in year 10. This is quite a long time ago, when I played them In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, and I played it to them you know, on like a nice set of like speakers, not, you know, like a proper PA system, and I sat them in the middle and I said, just be quiet and pay attention and just listen to how much like louder when those drums come roaring in, and how much do you, like, I just get goosebumps now thinking about how that makes you feel. And a lot of that stuff, like on those old funk albums, is, you know, you got vinyl where they had to make it as loud as possible without making the needle jump, but you have all this headroom and this dynamic, so that when it's soft, and when it's loud. Now
I mean, there is a lot of misty-eyedness about vinyl, I've got to say. I mean, a good quality digital file has, you know, more information on it now than vinyl did, and without the scratching and without the EQ roll-offs. But if you do get a really nice vinyl that has got no scratches and no dust on it, and you've got a really nice stylus, then it just sounds absolutely gorgeous. I guess your point really is about their attention to detail in terms of creating a space, is it?
Because I mean, you mentioned that when you were talking about, you know, making these decisions about drums and rooms and things like that, and I guess we can start to lead into that point, is, you know, when students are recording, because at its core, a song has always been, in my mind, if you can play it on guitar or piano, whatever, and sing, that's a song. But it's the adding to it, how you make decisions about like why the drums are doing this and why the bass is doing that. When you listen to those Troy Kingi albums, man, even like Outside In, another one of your artists, I had a chat with them. The amount of detail that they put into that stuff is just incredible. Like, you and I and many others are really putting those headphones on and paying attention to it, and it rewards the listener.
That record is amazing. It's an album called Karma Train, produced by Johnny and in the band, and also engineered and produced by Dave Rhodes. Who's just done an amazing job on that record. It's stunning. But I think music goes through fashionable trends, and for a long time, certainly up until recent years, you'll have heard of the thing called the loudness wars, which basically was about competing for radio loudness.
I'll come back to that in a moment as well. I'll talk about a point about that in a moment, but sorry, keep going.
Well, yeah, so basically when you finished your mix, it goes to the mastering engineer, and the mastering engineer's job is to make the track as dynamic and as loud as possible for the market you're going for. But in the competition for the loudness wars, what that meant is that's tracks, you have to understand, what's mastered is compressed, right? So you by nature lost a lot of the dynamic range, and the louder you want it, the more compressed you need it to be, right? The fatter it needs to be, that wave. So you lose a lot of dynamics. So you get this very sort of flat, really in your face kind of track, which has become sort of de rigueur, like, you know, people expect to hear music that way. So I've actually seen it in students when you play them an older record that has way more dynamic range, and it's like the eyes go wide and they're like, oh my God, I can hear so much more information. And So, when we're mastering our artists, if it's a pop track, then we have to, follow those kind of rules. But for most of the artists I work with, we prefer to go for dynamics and depth as opposed to loudness.
And having that like the room to move and the room to breathe within a mix is such a beautiful thing. Like, as I said earlier with my dad's setup, being able to turn up the Harman Kardon amp and sit back and listen to the vinyl. Like, I actually love the little crackling noises.
Yeah.
Every now and then, something would, skip because it'd be something on the record or whatever. But I don't know, man. You're right, and so I'll just say this quickly. You're right that nowadays, especially with the lossless files, where you're getting everything, because MP3 is a compressed format, but lossless, you can, as long as it's mastered well, you're going to hear all of those things that songwriters are putting into the things they're putting in the music.
Absolutely,
it's a beautiful thing, man. It's
and
rewarding.
As bandwidth increases, and that's basically, MP3s don't need to be the thing anymore, and it's, at some point, good riddance to them, basically. But the other thing I'd say about vinyl, which I actually think is the most important thing about vinyl, compared to a digital file or a streamed file, is ritual.
Yes.
There's something special, as you mentioned earlier. I don't know if it was in the recording or before the interview, about pulling a record out of its sleeve, opening the gatefold, placing it on the turntable, placing the needle on the vinyl, and sitting down to listen to a record. A record which is an album, probably, which means it is a collection of music made in a single period of time, a bit like an artist having an exhibition of their paintings in a series, that relate to each other, potentially tell a story of narrative across all of the songs which you follow, or even at the very least have been written at a similar time in the artist's life, so there is an emotional resonance to those songs. There is a period in their life when they're writing a certain way, and so the album captures that. It captures a moment in time when the band are together in that studio. So it has a sonic to a whole album. So you sit down and you immerse yourself, and you give yourself permission to take time to enjoy the art. And if you're just chucking your headphones on and you're going for a run, or you're driving in the car, or you're at work, it's in the background, it's wallpaper, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is a real pleasure in taking the time to listen to an album, and the vinyl format requires you pay attention, because you've got to turn the thing over. So you've kind of got to be present, it's tactile. The album art's big. You can read the notes and, read who's on the record, and, just get all that information in, and just absorb yourself into a piece of art. I mean, I think it's only like 3 Sundays ago when I, found myself not having to work that particular day in the studio, and decided to put The Wall on by Pink Floyd on the turntable, and just sit down on a sunny Sunday morning with the doors open and just go, holy shit, like, life doesn't get better than this.
You know what? I love The Wall. I mean, as I mentioned before, we hit record, like Dark Side of the Moon for me first. But you know what? My favorite Pink Floyd album is Animals. That's 100% my favorite. Just because it's like 17 minutes for dogs. You got it's such a rewarding piece of music to listen to. I never liked it for a long time, and then one day it clicked. And when he played it live, oh man.
I don't think I've listened to that for like 3 or 4 years, so maybe that's about time I put that back on. Oh man, thank you for reminding me.
That's fine. In fact, I think you've answered one of you've probably given a solution to everyone's problems. Mindfulness. Taking time out for yourself to just gather your thoughts and to just let go of all the troubles that the world has to offer you. That ritual of pulling that, and listening and just giving yourself to the music, to me is a lost art. And I'm so happy to hear kids doing it more and more, and people actually doing it more and more. And it's refreshing to hear you chat about it, Matt, because
Well, I mean, I hope
I'm so passionate about it.
I'm sure. I mean, it must be the case. Surely, you're a teacher, so you'll tell me. But surely, that's the escape for kids. For me, it was an escape. I was,
Absolutely.
you know, I had a difficult upbringing in some ways, and you know, hiding in my room with headphones on or listening to my speakers low, just immersing myself in music was got me through and helped me with my mental health, helped me with my art, gave me something to focus on. Felt like I wasn't alone because there's these other people who are expressing emotions I could relate to. And, you know, I honestly believe that music is such a fundamental part of the human experience.
Absolutely.
That we really need to give it, you know, we should be giving it as much space as possible.
Dude, it's been around since, you know, like ancient times. It was used for ritual for a particular reason, you know, like it vibrates and resonates with you and makes you feel things. And I think that's such an important thing, is to acknowledge emotion and feeling. And that kind of leads me on to the last thing I want us to talk about, and that is you know, the power. Then all this music we're talking about, they're songwriters, they're songs. The power of songwriting for students is such a powerful thing. Not, I mean, you know, we could argue about the lyrics in regards to how it's kind of like therapy, but not all lyrics have to be, you know, therapeutic and about this, but just the actual process of creating a song. What's your experience with songwriting and seeing how it's transformed students' lives?
I can talk about that personally, and also the effect I've seen on students' lives, because I was privileged enough to spend quite a bit of time at Kuiper College with the legendary Nick Roberts, who I hope gets to see this, because Nick, if you are listening, I think you're a legend of a man, sir, for what you've done for those kids.
I want to talk to you, Nick, on the show, please.
Yeah. On a personal level, I can say that for every artist creating, whether it be a painting or a sculpture or poetry, or whether it's writing a song, when you're in the flow of writing, there's almost no thought. It just, in the creative process, you're in a moment, you can call it channeling. It doesn't really matter what you call it. It just is. Whatever your belief system is irrelevant to the creative process. And when you're in that process, if you're going through shit in your life, it's going to come out, but not necessarily literally. I think about some of the toughest times in my life when I've written music, which I've just taken the pressure off me. And the words aren't literally about the subject, but somehow the emotion is transposed through that process. So for me, it was vital for my mental health. And I've seen it with numerous people that without music in their life wouldn't be here, as simple as that. And one of the things that from looking at a student perspective, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about, you know, the work that Nick did at Kuiper College. You know, he made that school focus on band performance, writing and performance, basically, as opposed to more, you know, learning notation and all that kind of thing. It was all about being a musician, you know, from a more of a rock perspective, but not necessarily rock. But with real instruments and expressing how to write. And so he, you know, pushed people's boundaries by getting people from different ethnicities, musical tastes, to collaborate together, to write together. And as a result, you've got this amazing collection of students who write incredible music and feel safe and supported in doing so. And I was there for, I think probably quite a few months when I was doing some stuff with them. My community service, actually, 200 hours worth for speeding fines, and bloody worth it too. Working with those kids, it was such a joy, and also just seeing the incredible work that Nick's done. So, I mean, seeing kids in there, and this must be one of the things that you must find ultimately so rewarding. I mean, kids who have got challenging home environments, geez, heartbreaking stories, but without having to make them talk about anything, you give them a safe space to create music. And that's so empowering because no one can take that away from you. If you've got a space where you can go and write music and create music, no one can take that away from you. And that is your power and your gift. And it doesn't get much better than that, does it?
No, I mean, even just performing music. There's an interesting story, actually. Can't remember the lady's name, I should know this, but the lead singer from the band Four Non Blondes, she actually she produced a Christina Aguilera album. She's worked with her quite a bit, and there was a song called Beautiful. And apparently the story goes that Christina was in the studio laying on the ground and she sung that song, and there was all these flaws and stuff in it, and the producer, I can't remember her name, just said keep it because it's captured exactly what you're feeling and you don't need to change anything. And like as a music teacher and as just someone who loves
don't need
music,
to auto tune it.
No. When you see a performer, regardless of the style, as you mentioned, I think that's one of the key points that we've talked about is it doesn't matter what the style is. Stop pigeonholing things. When you see that person channeling that stuff and they're feeling it, you feel it too. And I'll never forget, I was at a Music in the Parks concert and there was this band that no one was really paying attention to, but I was there with my mates and I was getting into it and I was just like, just moving my knee to the beat and stuff. And a couple of songs in, the lead singer's like, hey man, I got the CD and I just want to give it to this guy over here because I could tell he's really into it. And so he gave me the CD. And I think the moral of that story is that, when people pay attention, you get this connection with music. And I love what you mentioned about the songwriting. I think channeling, anything. Sometimes you read your lyrics, like even yourself, you'll go back and read lyrics you wrote from a song and you weren't thinking about them. You just let go. But then a few years down the track, you read them and you go, oh man, it's telling me something about what I was going through then, and even though it's not directly, it does tell me something, and I've learned something about myself. You can
see your kind of your emotional development through time, back through your old songs, experiences that you've had, just the way you dealt with things, the way you felt about things. Keep your old songs, don't delete them.
No, I still actually have. I'll pull it out now. I showed some the other day. I got this book when I was 12, and it has all my lyrics and stuff from songs I wrote. And in fact, one of the eventually I started writing Mega Drive cheat codes for games in here because that was when the Mega Drive came out. But there was a song in here I'm not going to find. Oh, there it is. Look at that. Parahaki. I remember writing that at high school, and that ended up being on a CD that my band released in 2007, and I wrote that song back in the year 2001. And so
wow.
I keep all my songbooks. I think it's an important thing to do. Matt, it's been incredible talking to you. Your insight is insane, and I can see why people want to work with you. I can see why you do what you do. I think that the work that you've done with Kaipara College and that Nick is still doing with Kaipara College is absolutely insane. Play It Strange, the amount of songs you've had on there, the bands that have gone through RockQuest. Like, there's so many teachers that are an inspiration to me, and I learn, and I want to try to learn from them so I can try to do that stuff with my students. I think you've given them such insight that they can at least go away and question things and think, man, maybe I am going to try this. Maybe I am going to put on a record and listen to it differently. Maybe I am going to approach listening to a new style that I'm not familiar with to learn something. Those are important things.
Challenge yourself.
Yeah,
but
man.
Honestly, do not be scared of listening to genres outside of your comfort zone. In fact, make it a practice to do so. Every week, try and find something that you would never dream of listening to and challenge yourself to listen to it. And I guarantee you'll find gold in there. I
Absolutely.
guarantee it. And it will inform you.
Cool. So I always finish with one last question. And the question is, 3 words of advice that you would give to students listening that you think it could be about any 3 words, but 3 words that you think are important and vital from your experience to do with something to do with music, and you can explain them afterwards and what they mean. But 3 words.
You, try and find this camera. You are worthy.
Woo! I love that. And I mean, I can't say that better. Do you want to explain a little bit more? Or do you think that's it?
I think that's it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Again, Matt, thank you so much for spending time with me this evening. Make sure I've got to do this. Got to do this for my students. They've been telling me to do this, so I'm going to do it now at the end. So just hit that like and subscribe button and make sure you're ready to see the next video. Hopefully that's to their standard. I don't know.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. We'll see you next time. Thanks again.
You need like a t-shirt giveaway or some kind of like special promo code now.
I do. I'm gonna have to I'll get the kids to work out something. I'm actually setting it up so that eventually the kids do the interviews and I'm working with them. I want them to be the ones.
Oh, that'd be
questions.
awesome.
Yeah,
no, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. We're getting there. We're making progress.
Sign me up.
We'll
I'll do that.
Okay, man. Take care. See you later.
Cheers, brother. Thank you. See ya.